Last June, my presentation was on the Albert Pike Hospital. Since then, since June, we've had 5 straight historical talks covering history of the Scottish Rite. We talked about the pre-Pike years and the Civil War years. We talked about Pike and the Washington years. We talked about the first Pikeless years after he died. And then the next one in October was about the next great leader, Richardson. And the last month was about the construction of the House of the Temple. And so I thought that after 5 consecutive months of hardcore history, and besides that, this is the holiday season, I thought it might be a good time for a change of pace. So I've dusted off a talk that I made to the Table Lodge on a 5th Tuesday presentation during 5 years ago, 2006. It has holiday implications as we are approaching New Year's, and I suspect many of you will be involved in parties where the traditional song, Auld Lang Syne, will be sung. So, how many of you have sung or know about the song Auld Lang Syne? That's kind of what I figured most everybody has. So I suspect that most of you are probably just like I was. You probably know the words to the first verse and the chorus. And it's just, matter of fact, that was all I thought that was the whole song. I didn't know there was anything more to it than that. And but anyway, there's more to it. And do you know what these words mean in plain old English rather than the Scottish brogue? Well, this is what we're going to talk about tonight. And to do a proper job, we need to do a background check on the author of the song. And so who was the author? Well, the author was, by the way, was a Mason. And matter of fact, for many years later, he became the unofficial poet laureate of Masonry in general, worldwide. The author of the song Auld Lang Syne was the Scottish poet Robert Burns, normally considered by most literary people as the greatest of the Scottish poets. So let me give you some basic facts about Robert Burns. He was born January the 25th, 1759, died 37 years later, July the 21st, 1796. He was born in Alloway, which is near Ayr in southwestern Scotland. He was the oldest of 7 children. His father was a farmer, never was a landowner, always a tenant farmer, always leasing the farm. Robert was born into semi-poverty and never improved his financial status during his 37 years of life. He had only 3 years of formal schooling, but became an avid reader, and so actually was self-educated. As so many of the people back in those days, as we read about them now, they basically were readers, and they read themselves into an educated state. Anyway, I could go into a long deal on that with our complicated education system that we have right now, and we seem to be failing. But anyway, back to Robert Burns. At age 13, he wrote his first poem, and the name of it was Handsome Nell. These are the basic facts. So now let's get back and investigate Robert Burns, the poet. As stated earlier, he had been labeled the greatest of all Scottish poets, and he found this gift at an early age. Throughout his short life, he was always writing poems, lyrics to music, and letters. He was basically a farmer, as his father was, and an unsuccessful farmer most of the time. And he was also unsuccessful in most of his other attempts to make a living and support his family. He was recognized as a gifted writer during his adult years, but was never successful in selling his work until at age 27 He had given up trying to keep a job, and he planned to leave for Jamaica, leave Scotland for Jamaica, and perhaps start a new life. To obtain money for the passage, he arranged for the publication of some of his poems in the Scottish dialect. That was all he had to try to raise some money, and so he decided to do that. Well, it was amazing. The immediate success of the poems was so great that he gave up his immigration project and stayed in Scotland. The income was not great enough to offset his loose living, and so he never became rich and actually died in pretty much the same state of semi-poverty into which he was born. Some critics have pointed out that Bruns took many of the Scottish peasant songs and ballads that had been sung for years but had never been reduced to writing and called them his own. However, scholars of prose and poetry described this early day plagiarism as in these words. Now, you can tell by their words, this is from scholars who are writing this. The lyrics that Bruns produced were not in the crude form in which he found them. He added, subtracted, amended as he thought best. And from this slag-bound ore, he minted pure gold. This analogy at the end, of course, obviously was from a scholar, but they're just basically saying he took plain old words and made beautiful prose out of them. Why is Robert Bruns held in such high esteem by both the scholars and the man on the street? That's kind of an unusual combination. The answer is he wrote from the heart, and he was the voice of the common man. He was their advocate, publicist, a philosopher, and friend. Bruns had the vision of a better world. He was a revolutionary, reformer, a Mason, a tireless opponent of oppression, privilege, hypocrisy, and racism. Yes, he was a Scottish poet who, after he died, became a writer loved by the world. Unfortunately, as many famous people, it was after he died when he became famous. So, Robert Bruns, another aspect of his life was that he was a revolutionary, a reformer. We mentioned among his traits that he was this revolutionary. So let's examine that aspect of Robert Bruns. After his father died from overwork and still bankrupt, made him a rebel against the social order of the day, and a bitter satirist of all form of current religion and political thought. Bruns lived in tumultuous times, the 18th century. It was during these times that the American Revolutionary War was fought, which resulted in many great pieces on liberty. And of course, the great one from the United States was the Declaration of Independence. A few years later, the French Revolution occurred with its chant of liberty, equality, fraternity. During this same time, the reform movement in Britain took place to correct an ineffective electoral system. So what brought on this whole revolutionary type period of time? During these days, there was a deeply entrenched establishment with their vested interest in land, property, politics, and even religion. The common man had no opportunity to improve his status in life. So Bruns was a product of the times, and through his writings, he spoke for the common man and against this squeeze that the landed gentry had on all of the rest of the people. One of his biographers made this statement: with only 3 years of formal schooling, Bruns and his writings is much more remembered than the 2 monarchs and the 11 prime ministers who dominated the scene during his lifetime. Bruns' credo was as follows, kind of long, but it's wouldn't it be wonderful if every political party here in the United States and everywhere would adopt this as an ex officio part of their platform. But this is what Bruns said: Whatever mitigates the woes or increases the happiness of others, this is my criterion of goodness. And whatever injures society at large, or any individual in it, this is my measure of inequity. This Bruns, of course, was revolution. This credo of Bruns was a bit revolutionary, and this is why he was kept from government jobs, even though because of his speaking and writing ability, he was certainly qualified. When the farming didn't work out for him, normal person would have gone on and gotten a government job of some kind and been successful. But he was barred from that because he was called a troublemaker. Let's look now at Bruns the Mason. This is what ties him in to us tonight. These political and economic times actually fostered the Masonic movement. Masonry was a great opportunity for Robert Bruns to meet and enjoy the company of men who held these same ideas as he did. He became a Freemason at the age of 23 in 1788. He quickly absorbed the symbolism of the craft. In my research, I ran across this statement: conviviality. Conviviality. That's spelled C-O-N-V-I-V-I-A-L-T-Y. Conviviality was Bruns. For Bruns was one of the most important virtues of Freemasonry. Does anyone know what this word means? I certainly didn't. I had to look it up in the dictionary. But the answer is, conviviality is enjoying companionship in the pleasures of feasting and drinking. Well, as we all know, back in those days, after lodge meetings, the members adjourned to the pub or the bar for a nightcap, or two, or sometimes three. Anyway, this was right down Robert Bruns' alley. We can say that Bruns found in Masonry a splendid vehicle for the development of his philosophy and the opportunity to spread it. The largest collection of Robert Bruns' work outside of Scotland is located in the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. We spoke of that last time when we were talking about the library and how it became enlarged over the years. Okay, now I've given you these various aspects of Robert Bruns. Let me give you we looked at them all except one. We have dug up the basic facts, looked at the man as a poet, a revolutionary, as a Mason. Now let's take a look at the other side of Robert Bruns. Let's go back to the word conviviality, enjoying the companionship while partaking in the pleasures of eating and drinking. The above is a formula for enjoyment in moderation, but the drinking for Bruns became a problem. Liquor had always been a bad temptation for him, but it was not his worst. His worst temptation was women. Let me get to that in just a minute. Regarding his drinking, he was not a common drunk. In other words, he wasn't a falling down drunk every night, sleeping in the streets and that sort of thing. But he did drink far too much for his own health and reputation. More than once he alienated friends by some drunken rudeness which no remorse could repair. And now back to his other vice. Robert Bruns had many affairs with women, premarital, extramarital, postmarital, constantly. His affairs with Mary caused the writing of the poem Highland Mary, and after her death, another poem, To Mary in Heaven. Both of those became quite widely respected works of art. His affairs with Clarinda prompted the writing of many letters, which were kept by her and later published. His long relationship with Jean Armour began at an early age. The marriage occurred after she found out she was going to be a mother. Prior to the marriage, Bruns had already produced an illegitimate daughter. So this Jean Armour, who he married, she reared their 5 sons, his 3 illegitimate daughters. By the way, they were all named Elizabeth. And she was in labor with their 6th son when Bruns died due to rheumatic fever, which he contracted while caught in a storm while intoxicated. So Robert Bruns was a genius with words, who lived a life with many ups and downs, always in need of money and obsessed with the demons of wine and women. This is the last piece in the puzzle. Why an intelligent, witty, charming person could not get or hold a job and lived his life basically in semi-poverty. Now, 215 years later, Bruns is not remembered for these negative traits because they are so outweighed by the principles which he wrote about in his gift of beautiful prose. Brother Bruns left to the world the teachings of brotherhood, honesty, pride, and the interdependence of love and friendship. He voiced the spirit of equality and was unswerving in his devotion to liberty. This is the person people remember. Bruns is credited with coining the phrase, the mystic tie, which is still used today to describe Masonry. So, this is the person who wrote the lyrics to Auld Lang Syne. So let's get back to the song, which we mentioned at the beginning. Keeping in mind the life of its author, millions of people throughout the world see out the old year and bring in the new every year to the music and words of Auld Lang Syne. Very few of these people know all of the words, and even fewer know what they mean. The possibility is that Bruns only wrote 2 of the 5 verses, but as he did with numerous other Scottish songs, he modified them and in some cases purified them. The song initially centered on 2 young men who drifted apart after their schooling days, and who, after reuniting as adults, reminisced about their earlier times together while having a few Willy Watts at a local pub. They are concerned with the moment because they're afraid there may be another long absence. Thus the song has become 1. Good friends joining together, enjoying the old times and concerned about the new times. And 2, it has become a song of departure, also considered a drinking song. This song is sung not just in the English language, but around the world. And let me give you an example. There is a major department store in Tokyo, Japan. At the end of their business day, rather than advising their customers over the intercom that in 5 minutes the store will be closing, they play the universal departure song, Auld Lang Syne. Now, there's a lot of difference between the culture of Japan and Scotland, but this song has bridged the gap. There are even some lodges in Europe who end their meeting with the singing of this ballad. So let's now take a closer look at the song itself. Johnny will pass out the words to the song, both in its original form and with a modern translation. So while he's handing those out, let me call your attention to the bottom of the page. There's a glossary there, and it'll help you if you'll read that, and because it explains some of the Scottish words and their translation. Let me go through it. There's the word aboot means about. Braes means hillside. Braid is the word broad. And burn means a stream. Fit is foot. Friar, friend. Geese means give me, and gallons is red berries. Good means good, and hay means have. Mony is many, and paddle is paddled. Pint stoop is a tankard. Pound is pulled. Sin, sense. Tack means take. Twa means two, and Williwatt is, which I mentioned earlier, is a draught of beer. So most of these are, this is translations from Scottish to English. And some of them are just these Scottish colloquialisms like the Williwatt. But anyway, going back to the song itself, the name Auld Lang Syne, strictly translated, is the words are translated old, long, since. Now put in the context of the song, the English translation is days of yore. And you'll see that right there on the top of the modern translation, the days of yore. And if you Americanized that, the translation would be days gone by. So what I want to do right now is that since most people, you can read after you get home, you can take these with you, but after you get home you can read the last 4 verses. But the first verse and the chorus is what everybody knows. And so what I want to do is I think it'll help if I read as best I can the Scottish brogue in the original version, and Johnny Offord is going to read the modern translation by line by line. So here we go. Johnny, you ready?
Ready.
Should all acquaintance be forgot,
Should we forget our former friends,
and never brought to mind?
by whom we set great store?
Should all acquaintance be forgot,
Should we forget the friends we've met,
and Auld Lang Syne?
and the brave days of yore?
And then the chorus was, for Auld Lang Syne, my Joe,
The days of yore, my dear,
for Auld Lang Syne.
the days of yore.
We'll take a cup of kindness yet,
We'll tilt the jug and drain the mug,
for Auld Lang Syne.
to the brave days of yore.
So that's the way it goes, and so you can see the meaning of the word of the piece, and how 2 old friends sitting around reminiscing and talking, and one of these friends had gone across the ocean, and so it mentions here about that fact, and so if you'll read the rest of it afterwards, so I think it'll be enjoyable, and you'll get a little know what's going on. So in closing, let me just say, I hope this presentation has put the spotlight on Auld Lang Syne and its author, Robert Bruns. And that the next time you sing this song, you'll remember what the words mean, and you'll have a perspective of the circumstances from which the song was born. And also the fact that a gifted mason was the author. And probably most important for this presentation was that the word conviviality, which is being with good friends, remembering the good old days, and looking forward to the future while having some drinks, can be a wonderful time if things are done in moderation. And so to close this meeting, let me say in the chorus, for Auld Lang Syne, my Joe, for Auld Lang Syne. We'll take a cup of kindness yet, for Auld Lang Syne. Thank you.